Cool, then let's get started, right? So welcome to this session on Introduction to Digital Accessibility. So about me, we will have a quick introduction and some agenda, and then we will get started, right? So I love to wear many hats. So three predominant hats that professionally I wear are, I'm a software professional with Salesforce. I've been in different roles previously with SAP Labs and so on. And currently I play a role as an accessibility SME, right? And I've been in the industry for around a decade now. And the second role that I play is more of an educator or an instructor. So if you have known, Pilani has a WILP division, which is called Work Integrated Learning, right? So participants are employed elsewhere and they pursue their master's programs over the weekend. So I also teach in those in the weekends. And the third hat, as you know, our friend just told, is I'm also a PhD candidate at Pilani Goa campus, and focusing on digital accessibility, people with disabilities, and software engineering and their intersections, right? So what we will try to do is we will have a quick introduction of digital accessibility in this workshop. So what are the objectives, right? At the end of this workshop, what do we want to take away? So first things first, we will understand the various types of disabilities, right? So the whole spectrum of disabilities, and there are a lot of models of disability, or you can also tell that those are different schools of thought, right? So few people align to few models better. There are other models which people don't much align with, and so on. We will discuss about all those. We will also have a look at what are assistive technologies, right? So what do we mean by assistive tech, and what is accessibility? Are they different or are they the same? Or if they are different, how are they different, and so on. And we'll also look at the PORE principles. So it is an abbreviation. We will look at each of the principles and how does that support equal access. We will learn about all that. And we will also learn to apply certain accessibility best practices. And then post that, we will also finally learn some small tools and hacks on how do you test for accessibility, what are those tools, how do you review for accessibility at a design stage, development stage, and so on. And we will also in between have a lot of fun activities, right? Maybe I've given you some puzzles, but there are also some quick demonstrations that you see there, right? So they will simulate a certain kind of disabilities. There are some cards which have braille in them and so on. So we can have those quick activities in between. There are some keyboard only challenge or others where, you know, some of you can participate, and, you know, we'll see how that goes, right? So the agenda, as I discussed, we'll first get started with disability basics, right? So what are all the different disabilities and which ones are recognized, and the different models and so on. And we'll also have a look at disability etiquette, right? So how do you behave with people with disabilities? We'll also have a look at those. Then we will see accessibility, and in particular, our focus would be on digital accessibility. We will emphasize on that part. And then we will look at some accessibility features, right? So how many of you have an Android phone here? Okay, all of you. Okay, perfect. iOS, one of you. Okay. So all Android and iOS phones have built-in accessibility features. They are freely available. They are built into our operating systems. Even our Windows laptops and MacBooks have built-in accessibility features. We'll explore a couple of them. We will try to understand how are they helpful for people with disabilities. And we will also look at the benefits of accessible design, right? So whom is it benefiting? Is it just for people with disabilities, or is it beyond that? We will look at all of those. And we will also again go deep into these PORE principles, and a brief introduction to something called as WCAG. We will have a look at that. And finally, some myths and misconceptions about accessibility. So there is a lot of general myths about accessibility, right? Or about people with disabilities. So we'll try to burst those myths, and we'll wind up for today, right? Is the agenda clear for everyone? Yeah, cool. So first things first, do you have any idea about how many people with disabilities exist in the world? Yeah, any random number or percentage? Or how many people exist in the world? Yeah, 8 billion. Yeah, perfect. Approximately. So how many people among the 8 billion might have some form of disability? Yeah, that's a lot. So it's about 20%, right? So as per the WHO, about 1.3, 1.5 billion. And we should also take this with a pinch of salt, because in general, this whole topic about disabilities has a lot of taboo around it, right? So experts in the field also feel that there could be a lot of underreporting. People might not accept that they have a disability, or there might be a lot of disabilities which has gone unnoticed, right? Maybe never diagnosed and so on. So this number could be actually a little more. So we can consider this as somewhere around 2 billion people, right? And among this, how many people are with disabilities in India? Any idea? This is across the globe, right? About 30 million, right? About 30 million people have some form of disability and they reside in India, right? And again, this again should be taken with a pinch of salt, because this itself is more than a decade old, right? So this was found from the last census, which is from 2011. And again, there could be underreporting and not diagnosed ones and so on. And there is good amount of money that goes every year into the empowerment of people with disabilities, right? So if you see the last budget, year on year, every year, consistently about 1,000 plus crores goes into the upliftment and empowerment of people with disabilities, right? So some are the other schemes and about accessibility and so on. These funds go into upliftment. Each state has our Department of Welfare for people with disabilities, right? So these funds also go there. So some disabilities are very immediately obvious, correct? So for example, if someone is in a wheelchair or someone without a limbs or arms, it's quite evident and we might be able to immediately know that the person is having a disability. But not all disabilities are visible, right? So there could be disabilities which are not visible. So for example, how we might know if a stranger who's sitting in an airport, who's maybe reading a book, we might not know if they are hard of hearing and so on, right? Or maybe someone who has, say, cognitive disabilities, right? Say limited comprehension, or say who's a person with, say, limited problem solving skills, right? So we might not be able to know that just by looking, right? So disabilities can be broadly into something that is visible and something that is not visible apparently, right? And what are the different types of disabilities? Yeah. So any of you, what are the broad categories or different types of disabilities? Yeah. Hearing, very good. Yeah. Visual. Motor, very good. Yeah. Something else came up from there. Right. So broadly, there are 4 categories. As our friends told, firstly, it is visual. So a couple of disabilities related to visual. And then we have auditory and speech. And then we also have motor. And finally, something called as cognitive, right? So these are the 4 broad categories, but there are a lot more that fall under each of these buckets. So we'll also have a look at them. So going into specifics, what type of visual impairments are you aware? What type of auditory disabilities are you aware? Any names? Types of disabilities? Color blindness, very good. What else? That comes under visual, right? What else? Yeah, that comes under cognitive. What else? Hard of hearing, right? A lot more. So let's quickly get into those. We'll not go too deep into them. We'll just have a brief introduction of what each of them mean. So firstly, we have blindness, which is also, say, lack of vision or lack of sightedness, which is complete loss of vision, right? A person with blindness will not be able to use their vision to perceive the world, right? And the reasons for this could be plenty, starting right from, say, diabetes, so to say glaucoma, and say macular degeneration or retinal pigmentsota and so on. So there are a lot of biological reasons behind the disability, which we are not going to go deep into. But this is one type of disability under visual category. What else in visual? We had color blindness that you told. But before that, there is also something called as low vision, right? So low vision are people who have vision, but even with corrective measures, they are far close from perfection, right? So because of this, they might not be able to drive. They might not be able to see or read things unless it is enlarged a lot, right? And this again is not Boolean, right? You cannot just tell that a person has low vision, a person doesn't have low vision. So it's all a spectrum of things. So again, intricacies are low vision with, say, color contrast, cataracts, and loss of central vision, and so on. So a lot of these kits or simulation kits that we have placed here will give you some idea about what are these combinations about, right? Again, a word of caution: these are only to create empathy and also to have a feel of how the disability actually looks like, right? But this doesn't mean that this is equivalent to a person who has experienced that disability, right? Because that is more complex than wearing these glasses for a couple of seconds. In between, in the break, maybe you can also have a look at those. And the third one being color, right? Color blindness again comes in various forms, right? It has subcategories, a couple of colors alone. So it is very rare that a person with color blindness has complete color blindness, right? Where they're not able to differentiate between any color. That is very rare. Usually it has a couple of intricacies. Maybe you can also have a look at these images. Let me just, yeah. So this is where a person maybe who has complete color blindness, right? Where they're not able to differentiate between any color. This is something how it looks. But what about this one? Are you able to read the numbers that are written in this? Yeah, what are those? 6, 8, 45, 56, right? What about this image? Are you able to read the numbers in them? Oh, some level of difficulty. Okay, it's the same numbers. Okay, it was the same numbers. So there are also a lot of interesting tests around this. Yeah, so for example, if we might just open these, this one, right? So if you have a look at these, so how does colorblind tests work? There's a lot of tests around. Of course, you should not use this as a replacement for medical tests, right? So these are just preliminary tests that you can do it on your own, and also try to see if we are able to perceive and differentiate all colors. And if we are not able to differentiate a lot of colors in these images, then it's a good idea that maybe we actually do a medical test and also see which type of if at all we have some color related impairments. And again, there are some interesting dynamics around these, that 1 in 12 men have color blindness, right? So staggering data: 1 in every 12 men have color blindness. And when it comes to women, 1 in 200 women have color blindness. The next one is deaf blindness, right? So deaf blindness is something where a user is not able to perceive vision, loss of vision, as well as loss of hearing, right? For all of these disabilities, we will also have a look at how can technology help, right? So what are these assistive technologies? What is accessibility? And for each of these, we will have a look at it a little later. Auditory disabilities. So our friend there had told about auditory disabilities. So under auditory disabilities, again, this is not Boolean, right? We cannot just classify that this person has auditory disability or not. So there are subcategories. One is complete loss of hearing, or say deafness, or it could also be something where say partial, right? Say hard of hearing, partial hearing loss, and so on. So depending on the condition, this could vary, where a person could use a hearing aid or use sign language or use captions and so on. The next one being mobility, flexibility, and body structure disabilities, right? So this is a whole category of disabilities where which impacts a person's ability to move with a person or with a purpose or independently, right? So if that is the case, then this could also be because of a lot of reasons, right? From say severe arthritis, or it could be due to some accidents, right? Or trauma incidents and so on, because of those. And you might have even heard about Dr. Stephen Hawking, right? All of you, physicist, right? So you might have seen him using a smart wheelchair and a couple of other devices to communicate with technology, right? So he had something called as ALS. It is more of a lateral sclerosis, right? So all these come under this category of disabilities, which at the end impact movement, right? So someone may not be independently or purposefully able to move, right? Maybe they lose balance or things like that. And then the next one is cognitive disabilities. So you're told about autism, right? So a lot of other categories come under cognitive disabilities. And this is also one of the most difficult ones to define, right? So this is way more complex because this is not very visible, right? So it could be lack of comprehension, it could be lack of say problem solving skills. You might have come across a lot of people who suffer with captchas, right? Captchas, have you all solved it? In some of the other websites we solve a captcha to prove ourselves as humans, right? So in those cases a lot of people might suffer to solve those captchas. So that could be lack of problem solving skills. It could also be a case where short term memory loss is one example, right? Short term memory loss, or um, maybe attention deficiency, right? So all these come under the category of cognitive disabilities. Again, reading disabilities, again on the race, dyslexia and others. You might have also seen these type of pages that simulate this, right? So people with dyslexia also claim that they often see characters and words being often rolling and jumbling each other. That makes it very difficult for persons with dyslexia to read, right? So I will to see the words jumbling around, quite difficult, right? So this simulates dyslexia. And the next one being math disabilities, right? So how many of you love math here, right? Nobody? Okay, just one, two. So there are a lot of new results that are coming up that math disabilities are actually not because of intellectual reasons, but because of psychological reasons, right? So this is not actually a disability. It starts as a condition where people are very anxious about math, and maybe even as simple as maybe currency exchange and so on, where they're very anxious and they are afraid of doing any math calculations. And recent results have shown that this is maybe because in their childhood they were given math problems, and they had been instructed to solve it within a time, right? Maybe 5 minutes or maybe half an hour. You have to solve all this, right? So maybe they have not been able to, and that is a psychological impact on them rather than an intellectual disability. But when that condition becomes even stronger and they are fearing for every math or number, then that turns to be more like a math disability. And then we also have speech disabilities, right? So there are again variants. It could involve a complete muteness, where a person is unable to produce any voice and speak. Or there could be variations where it could be stuttering or cluttering, and there are other type of complex speech disabilities like aphasia and others. Also have seizure disorders. Again, this starts as a disorder, but it could really become fatal at times. So seizures are some kind of sudden electrical impulse in our brain, right? And it could cause epilepsy and other type of conditions. And how many of you have seen Pokemon? Right, Pokemon is a series, right? So a couple of you. There was a series in your childhood, maybe, right? So when this series came up, within the first few weeks, more than 600 kids were admitted in hospitals because of photosensitive epilepsy, right? So photosensitive seizures. So even in modern web, you might see a lot of places where there's a lot of flashy content, right? So suddenly there's new popping up everywhere and flashy content. So those could cause seizures for certain users, right? Which is it's a sudden impulse in their brain, and they might have even fatal effects, right? So these are very important conditions which we might have to take care during our software development. We'll talk about all that a little later. Then we also have psychological or psychiatric disabilities. Again, these conditions usually start as a condition, right? So they're not disabilities at front, but what happens is slowly, if that condition is going to hamper our day-to-day life, then it becomes a disability. So these could involve things like, say, anxiety, or having obsessive compulsion, or it could also have something like, say, depression. And there's something called as SAD, yeah, which is seasonal affective disorder, where some people feel off and depressed in some seasons, right? Maybe in winter they're not able to get out, they're not able to do any work, and they feel a lot more down than in summer, right? So these are also conditions that come under psychological disabilities, where in few seasons it affects people. All right. And of course the last one that is answered here is more of a compound disability. A compound disability could be something which has combination of multiple of these, right? So far so good, all of you. We looked at some statistics about disabilities, like 20% of the world and we also looked at some form of disabilities. So how many recognized disabilities are there in India? Yeah, any idea? What do you mean by recognized, first of all, right? So meaning these disabilities are recognized by the government of India, and just like our passport or Aadhaar card, a person with these disabilities will be able to get it certified from a medical practitioner, and they can avail a card. And that card can be used for a lot of welfare schemes, accommodations, and so on. For example, in your university exams, if a person with disability has a card and they need extra time in the exam, right, so they can actually avail such services using the disability card, or maybe in employment and so on, so they can use their disability card. So how many recognized disabilities exist in India? Any idea? Yeah, any number? 11? 8? Okay, you were close. So it was 7 initially, and in the last Disability Act, which was in 2016, it has been increased to 21, right? So there's a huge list here, starting from, say, blindness, low vision, and dwarfism, speech disabilities, and so on. So it has been increased to 21 now, right? Again, this doesn't cover all the disabilities, because disability comes in a lot of ranges, and it's not just yes or no. So in the next coming acts, this might also be revised often, right? And these types of disabilities we just spoke are not always permanent in nature, right? A lot of people have this misconception that maybe disabilities are permanent, maybe right from their birth, or once they acquire the disability, maybe that's permanent, is what people believe, but that's not the case, right? So it could be either permanent or temporary or even situational, right? So for example, if someone has a broken arm, then they might actually face certain difficulties till they are back to normal, right? So in that duration, they face a temporary disablement. Or maybe if there's a new mom who's holding a child in their hand, right? So they have limited functionality, right? So they might be able to use only one arm for the time being, still they're holding a kid. So it could be situational in nature. Let's assume you are watching a movie and you are going in the metro, right? There could be a lot of noise around, right? So that could also be situational. You might not be able to concentrate on the movie or video that you're watching in your mobile because there's a lot of noise around. So that could also be a situational case, right? So for all the disabilities, that is not always permanent, right? It could be either situational, or it could also be, at times temporary. So now let's get on to this theoretical models of disability. So what are these, right? So in simple terms, there are a lot of ideologies, right, or different schools of thought that people align to, and all of these are related to disabilities, right? So the first model being medical model. So a lot of medical practitioners align with this model, and they always feel that disability is a condition, it is a problem, and through medicines and through say any type of therapy, this could be fixed, right? That is what is this school of thought telling. So all of these models that we discuss now has its own strengths and weaknesses, okay? We'll not go too deep into it, but just remember that each model is an ideology. It depends on which stance are we going to take, right? So which model are you aligning more with, right? The first one being medical model, where medical practitioners always see disability as a problem. There's a problem, how do I fix this, right? Through medication. The second one being a social model, right? Where a lot of activists and so on, they believe that disability is not a problem with a person, but it is with the society. They tell that the environment around us has certain barriers, and that is what is disability. So that is what is their take. So let's take an example, right? So for example, if a person is unable to walk, the medical model will tell that this is the problem, you're not able to walk, so maybe you'll have to take a wheelchair, these are the conditions, these are the medications that you need to take, and so on. But on the other hand, the social model will tell that, okay, each of us have varied abilities. So this person is not able to walk, but why don't you have ramps and lifts in all buildings, right? So you're not having it, so that's a problem with the society, not with the individual, right? So you understand the take. The first one is more of a personal, individual, medical condition, whereas in the social model, we tell that everyone has have different abilities. So it is the society that is creating this environment which has these barriers, and that is what is causing problems to people with disabilities. So this is the second model. The third model is a biopsychosocial model, which is more complex, and this actually understands that disability is multifaceted and it cannot be just defined as a person or it is because of society and so on. It actually brings the best of both of these and tries to firstly clarify that disability is a complex topic. Each one of them might acquire a disability, and as in when we grow old, our abilities are depleting, right? So all these models are accounted in the biopsychosocial model. The next one is economic model, right? So this is again a very different take, that people with disabilities or in general disabilities and economy of maybe an individual, a family, a country and so on, right? So let's take an example, right? So if a person with disability exists, firstly there are medical or other types of expenses, and there's another question of how long can the person with disability work? Is it full time or is it part time, or what type of economy or money can they generate? And then about their immediate family members as to what is the expenses incurred for treating or catering to these conditions. As an employer as well, right? As an employer, if you have say people with disabilities in our organization, so the economic aspect of are we actually providing accommodations, and are we taking care of all the accommodations needed by people with disabilities? And let's also take the example of our country, right? So if a country has a significant proportion of people with disabilities, then the budget allocated for the welfare of people with disabilities will go up, right? It's very natural. So the economic model talks about the whole economy around people with disabilities and the money that is spent. The next one is functional solutions model, right? So this model is a very practical model, right? So it tells that, okay, let's not talk about the problem, whose problem is it? Is it with an individual or society, or is it with the economy and all that? Let's keep all this aside and let's try to take a very practical approach by bridging the gap. In simple, people with disabilities face certain challenges, correct? Can we solve that using technology? It could be hardware solutions, it could be software solutions. Can we bridge the gap of the problems faced by people with disabilities through innovative solutions, right? So people also align with this model. The next one is social identity model, right? So this model again is a little different from the others in the sense that certain group of people with disabilities form a cultural identity, right? So one classic example is the deaf community. So if you Google about small DEAF, that is a condition, right? So that is about a person not able to hear. But if you Google about capital D, right, capital DEAF, so it is about a community or a group of users who identify themselves as hard of hearing, and they all practice sign language, right? So there are a lot of sign language. If you might have heard, there is American sign language, there is Indian sign language, there is Nepali sign language, and so on. And the people who practice these sign languages and who identify themselves as hard of hearing, they form a community of people, right? So they talk in this sign language. They also encourage people to learn this language who are a part of the community and so on. So this is more of a personal identity. People feel I belong to this community because I practice this and we also share a common disability. And then we have the charity or tragedy model, right? Where there is this sense of enabled person seeing disability as more of sympathetic thing, and maybe using say fundraising and other type of things, where they try to always see that a person with disability needs help and support, and as abled people, let's do that, right? So this is another take on it, and this model of late has been getting a lot of backslash, that this starts a lot of conversations about ableism, right? So the tragic model has got a lot of repercussions and people are against these type of models. And finally, there are other models there are activists and advocates who model things that, first of all, you should start or stop milking about disabilities or having new schemes and things like that which exploit people with disabilities in the name of these schemes and so on. So in general, these are the different schools of thought, right? So which model do you align most with? Which one do you think? For the newbies, so we just discussed about what is disabilities, what are the different types of disabilities, and which bracket do they fall. And we also saw that India has 21 recognized disabilities. And now we were just looking at some schools of thought, right? So these are all different models where people have associated different definitions of these models, right? So medical practitioners look at disability as a problem. The social model looks at disability as a social thing. It's the environment which creates problems. And biopsychosocial tells that this is not with the individual or with the society. It's a very complex topic. Economic model always is concerned about the economy revolving around disabilities, right? At an individual level, at a family level, at a country level. Functional solutions model says that, you know what, let's not care about all these models. There's a problem that a person with disability is facing. Let's come up with some solution to bridge the gap. And then we have the other models like the identity and the charity model, right? So which one do you align most with? Yeah, go ahead. Functional solutions model. Yeah. So most often engineers try to, have this thought process that apart from the other models, let's try to use technology solutions and in order to bridge the gap between the needs of a person with disability and tech solutions, right? So let's also now talk about some disability etiquettes, and then we will again move on to our assistive technologies, accessibility, and so on, right? So first things first, people with disabilities are not conditions, right? So they are first people. So they have hopes, dreams, positive, negatives, and So first things first, try to use people first language, right? So what do we mean by people first language? Anyone? We heard about people first language, right? So the people first language means that firstly putting the person and then the disability, right? So instead of telling a blind person, you can always tell person with blindness, right? So John is a person with blindness instead of telling blind John, right? So a lot of similar examples do exist here, right? So instead of telling handicapped and also using terms like the blind, the diseased, and so on, you can always put the person first and tell the disability later. Although in a lot of countries, the latter one or the former one, both of them are equally given importance. In India, usually in all the legal documents or in our gazette and so on, you will also see that people with disabilities, meaning the person is first addressed and the disability comes next, right? So this is what is more or less addressed in the Indian context. Address the person directly, right? So these are pretty basic etiquettes that if a person with disability has brought in interpreter or a companion along with them, right? So say suppose there's a blind person who's attending an event, and there are good chances that they also have accompanied someone along with them. So when you want to talk to people with disabilities, address them directly. Don't address it to the companion who has come with the person, right? So directly address what you want to talk to the person. For people who use wheelchairs, maybe always try to kneel down a bit or sit down so that you can maintain eye contact and not give them a lot of stress in their neck. And again, a couple of talking to people with disabilities. So a lot of times what happens is when people talk to people with disabilities, they suddenly raise their voice, or maybe they try to talk like a child, right? So don't try to do such things, and it's a good idea to maintain the same rhythm and pace. And maybe when talking with people with say speech disabilities, right? So if they are say about to complete a sentence, and if they are struggling to complete, don't try to complete it for them, right? So there's a lot of people with disabilities who tend to lead their life independently, right? So if they are trying to complete a sentence, be patient and listen to their lines instead of you completing their sentences, right? The next one again, putting your hands near your mouth, right? For example, a lot of hard of hearing people, right, or people with deafness, they have other sensory abilities which are way more powerful, right? Meaning they can observe your face and they can also look at your lip sync, and based on your lip movements, they will be able to also interpret what you're talking over time. So in those cases, it's always good that you look at the person straight and you also directly talk to them instead of turning somewhere else and talking, or closing your mouth and talking and so on, which hampers this whole process, right? And also stop playing these guess who games and so on, right? So where people just go and speak up and tell that you know what, guess me, and who am I, do you remember me, and things like that, right? So try to avoid such guess who type of games with people with blindness. You can always have a gentle introduction as to what you do and where you are. But in general, there is also this line of statements that we use, right? Like see you later and things like that. So those are still accepted because people with disabilities understand that you are not using this in a very literal context, right? So see you later simply means that you will meet them again later, right? So those type of colloquial languages are still accepted. Helping people with disabilities, right? This is a very important point that we just spoke about, that a lot of people with disabilities actually want to be independent, right? So don't assume that people with disabilities need your help. You can always go and check with them if they need any assistance, and if they need an assistance, go ahead and do it. Otherwise, you can leave them, right? So don't try to forcefully, without their permission, start intervening and starting to help them and so on. But on the other hand, if it is really obvious, right, so then try to help them. For example, if a person with blindness, maybe on the way, if they have, say, left their wallet, or if something has fallen down from their bag and so on, which they have not noticed, in those cases, definitely go ahead and help them, and don't be on the other extreme thinking that maybe I'll offend them and I should not help them and so on, right? When it is truly obvious, go ahead and do it. In other cases, first ask them if they need assistance before directly jumping or assuming that they need help. Also, a word about service animals, right? Pretty helpful topic. In general, service animals are doing a job, right? So you might have seen blind people using a service animal like a dog and so on. So they are on a job. So don't try to pet these animals while they are with their owner, right? A lot of people without awareness do this. They start playing with the dog, or they feed them and so on. So this can actually lead to dangerous situations, because these service animals are in a job for their owner and they have been trained to do something. And suddenly, if people start playing with it or feeding with it and so on, so then the dog will get distracted, and it could even prove dangerous to the owner, right? So when they are their job, don't try to do it. Maybe when they're not in the job, when they're away, then you can of course take the permission of the owner and try to play with the pet. So now, what all we have looked at so far is disabilities, disability basics. What are the types of disabilities? We also saw about the different categories and which umbrellas do they fall, and also some recognized disabilities in the country, and also some schools of thought, right? And we also briefly discussed about the various disability etiquettes. So slowly we will move on to the other topics of accessibility, assistive tech, and so on. But so far so good. Any doubts in general about disabilities and about the various types of it, the models of it, and so on? Yeah, so far so good. Cool. Then what is this question about, right? So what if I handed a blank newspaper to you? Will you be able to read the newspaper? Of course not, right? It is very similar, the case where you are handing over a newspaper to a blind person, right? Of course, they'll not be able to read. So this is also called as print disability, right? A lot of things which are on print poses to be a major challenge for people with blindness, right? Signs on buildings, packages, or in medicines, in business cards, and actual posts and so on. So all these are actually printed material, right? So people with disabilities, or in particular blindness, will not be able to read these, right? So what is the workaround for this, right? So this could be really a problem, but how do people read then? How do people with blindness read newspapers? Yeah. Yeah. Braille. Okay. What else? A person with blindness wants to read the newspaper but is unable to do so. So what are all the different options? Okay. Audio, right? So what all we can do, right? Since they cannot directly read, maybe there can be a friend or family who can read the newspaper for them, or they could someone can record the newspaper while they read it out loud and give the recordings to the person who has blindness. Or it could also be someone, as you told, it could be embossed in a braille newspaper, and we could go ahead and the person with blindness can use that. Or it could be an alternate form altogether. Instead of a newspaper, they can listen to the same topic in maybe a radio or a television, right? But all of these methods, although they work, they have some problems with them. Yeah. So any idea what are the problems with these in these given steps, right? What are the problems that you see with each of them? Exactly, right? We need external help, right? So in the next thing, if you see, maybe the friend or family is not available, right? So they're busy and they're not available at the moment. Or it might be also the case that they're just not ready to help. That's also a case, right? So people might also think that why is the case that daily I'm reading out news to this person, right? Maybe they can also think this as burden. Other case, right? Maybe the recording is not available on that particular topic the person is interested, or maybe there's a lag between when it was recorded and given to the person, right? Because news is relevant to time, right? Maybe if I record it today and send it to the other person after a few days, then it's not anymore news, right? And what if the person can't afford braille, right? So you're told about braille. So braille is actually way more costlier than normal paper, right? Because that's made up of thick paper and there's also holes in it, embossed to make a braille. So it's way more costlier than actual. And what if the person doesn't know to read braille, right? So there's also this fact for you that less than 10% of people with blindness in India can read braille, right? So then there's no point in even having brailles again and again, because if people don't even know it, then that is also not a viable option, right? But a commonality that your friend just pointed out is that all of these points cater to one ultimate thing that is also given in our Gandhiji's talisman. Have you heard about this? In all your textbooks and so on, you might have heard about Gandhiji's talisman, right? Yes, no, anyone? Nobody? So there's a beautiful word that he uses, which is called Swaraj, right? Which is ultimately about independence, right? So every human being, we at the end want to have a dignified and independent life rather on relying on other people for every small task, right? So all these, so I've taken just this one example of blindness for this whole examples, but in general, if you think about it, a lot of people with disabilities have dependency with other people, right from day to day tasks to their job, their career, their life, they're dependent on other people, right? Which is a bad thing, of course, right? So we want to aid people to have that freedom and to make people empowered to be independent, right? So this all comes again from the concepts of inclusivity and equality. Why should people be dependent on others for every small thing, right? So this is where digital text helps us, right? So now that all our texts are moving towards the digital ecosystem, we also have speech synthesizers. You had mentioned about speech synthesizers, which can directly translate what is written on text and speak it out loud, which a person with blindness can hear, right? Screen readers, these are the softwares that are called, which read your text and speak it out loud. And examples are, you have NVDA, TalkBack, JAWS, VoiceOver, and so on. And mostly these tools are freely available and they come built in with your operating systems, right? All your Android phones have TalkBack, all your iPhones have VoiceOver, your Windows laptops have Narrator, or you can also install freely available NVDA and so on. And we'll also have a look at some of those examples, how they work, right? And the web in particular has opened up a wide possibilities because everything is available on the click. And now a person with blindness can independently use their computer, read news, sports, whatever they want. They can also do e-commerce or anything that they want to do. They'll be able to do it with the help of these screen readers, right? Now this has given a altogether new level of independence, which we might have not thought about if there are no digital text or screen readers, right? So what are these screen readers called then, right? Screen readers are nothing but assistive technologies. So in general, assistive technology is any technology that is here to assist in our day-to-day life and make our life better, right? Any of you use assistive tech? Yeah. A lot of you are using assistive tech. Yeah. Your spectacles? Your spectacles are there to aid you in your day-to-day life, right? Maybe your vision is not 100% fine and you are taking help of another external device. It could be hardware, software, any technology, but it is helping you in your day-to-day life. So a spectacle is definitely an assistive technology. There are plenty of such examples. It could be, say, wheelchairs. It could be hearing aids, or it could be these type of smart canes with people with blindness use to navigate. And it could also be your spectacles or the day-to-day lenses that people use, right? And it could also be hearing aids and so on, right? So in general, any technology that is going to help us in our day-to-day life, and they are specifically designed for people with disabilities to help them, they are assistive technologies. But a lot of times these assistive technologies have become mainstream, right? Can you think about some of those? Something that would have been created for people with disabilities, but it has now become mainstream and everyone loves to use it. Yeah. Speech recognition, perfect. Yeah. So all of us use Alexa and Siri and so on, right? So this, if you date back to these technologies and why these things have been researched upon, the fundamental reason was assistive technology. They wanted to help people with, say, motor disabilities, who doesn't have a arm or who's not able to click the mouse because of arthritis and so on. And there was this idea of, let's build a technology where a person can just dictate what to do on a laptop, right? And then now you see that it is mainstream market and it is embedded in all our phones, and there are digital assistants that work on voice communication and so on, right? So in particular, for these type of disabilities that we just spoke about, these are the assistive technologies available. And this is not an exhaustive list. I've just mentioned a couple of them. So for example, for someone who's blind, they can use a screen reader, or they can also use a refreshable braille device, right? A refreshable braille device is a one which is used by people who are having loss of vision as well as loss of hearing. So they have only touch as their sensory modality. So whatever is written on the screen gets converted into braille line by line, right? So this is not a printed braille document. This is actually a device where line by line it gets translated into braille, and you can just read that line and the next line gets generated in braille and so on. I'll show you some images. And then we have low vision. For low vision users, you again have screen readers, you have screen enlargers, magnifiers, and so on. And for color blindness, we have color contrast modifiers, which can modify the color contrast of our complete screen and all the apps and so on. And for deafness, you can have captions and transcript, right? Captions are nothing but, all of you have used captions in some or the other form in YouTube videos, in our learning management tutorials. You also have the captions going down, right? And if you have the complete whatever was being spoken in audio in the form of a text file, that becomes like a transcript. For other disabilities like motor disabilities, we can also have headband, and mouth stick and so on, which we had taken this example of Stephen Hawking, right? So he used to use this headbands and mouth sticks often in order to give an input to the digital devices. Again, for cognitive disabilities, we can have screen overlay, screen readers, and so on and so forth. So this is just a small snippet of technologies which can help people with disabilities. And this is a whole track altogether, right? So there's a lot of companies and roles who are focused on creating assistive technology, right? So for most of the disabilities, we are still having just a couple of assistive tech. And with the whole intervention of, say, data science, AI, ML, and so on, we can come up with smart solutions, smart technological innovations, which can help people with disabilities by creating assistive technology, right? So what we will do now is we will take a couple of examples of both Windows and Android, and we will try to run some of these accessibility features that are built into our operating systems. And then we will also talk about accessibility, right? So far, we have just come with the flow of disabilities, disability types, and so on, and about how assistive technology help them. But this is not enough, right? So we will also further go about accessibility and if they are same or different from assistive tech. But before that, let's try to explore these options. Firstly, let me show you the Windows part of it. Right, the moment you go into settings, you would see a screen called accessibility. Any of you, have you come across this screen and have you used these? Have you played around with these type of things? Yeah. Perfect. So there's a list of tools available in all operating systems. It is available, right? The settings and the names might be slightly different, but they all offer similar capabilities, right? Firstly, text size, right? These are all related to vision. There are some categories, right, that we just spoke about. One is under vision, one is under hearing, about interaction and so on. So inside text size, we are able to see that, we will be able to adjust the text size as and when needed. And We also have options available for, say, visual effects, right? We'll be able to change the look and feel of scroll bars and the transparency of my screen. We can also change our mouse pointer sizes, right? You also see the size increasing there, right? The mouse pointer. We can also change the whole color and form of my mouse pointers, right? There is also the text cursor or magnifiers, where you can use the magnifiers for low vision users who might want to enlarge the whole screen and so on. And these days these features are also available directly embedded in our browsers also, right? For example, let's go to this Wikipedia page, right? So this is our IT Madras web page. Let's just right click anywhere, and you might see this option called open in reading mode. Yeah, any of you have tried this out? Yeah, very good. Yeah, so what does it really do? It gives you a comfort of your reading, customizations, right? For example, it has opened me this particular panel here, and we would be able to do a lot of things here, right? If I don't like this font, maybe I would love to change the font. We'll be able to do that. Let's keep it to this one. And I don't want this level of zoom, I can reduce the zoom, or I can also increase my zoom. And maybe I don't like the background, maybe I prefer a slightly yellowish background maybe, so I can change the background of this and so on, right? So it quickly enables the user to directly modify at a browser level rather than setting it up at the machine level. Again, screen readers as well. So we just spoke about narrator and so on. So here is narrator, which is a Windows built-in screen reader, which people with blindness can use. Again, Chrome and other browsers also have their own specific screen readers available. People can either use that or they can use the operating system supported one, right? So if we just turn on the narrator, it would start reading out all the content, right? Let's do that. So the audio is not enabled here, but can someone also come up as a volunteer and we can try it on your mobile phone? These are available on all our mobile phones, right? By default, it's freely available. So we can check the screen reader and how it works. Perfect, thank you. So your name and which device do you have?
Aryan Misra.
And which device do you use?
S21 FE.
Android.
Android.
Yeah, perfect. You can also speak out while you say what you're doing.
Okay, I'm opening accessibility section. Vision enhancement?
Yeah, right there.
Hearing.
Yeah, right there. You can increase the volume maybe and showcase it to people.
Talk back on. What? Close button. Close button. Close tutorial. You
Stand tutorial or?
Yeah.
close.
Just operate
button.
your phone with talkback. Let's see.
Okay.
Allow talkback to. Double tap to.
Okay.
Nav home button window navigation bar.
Whatever
Double
I click.
tap to activate.
Okay.
Back button. Back button. Home button.
Let me just do it for you.
Double tap
Okay.
to activate.
So as you see, actually, the screen readers,
Procedure H. Home. Google. Home.
so they work a little differently, right? So these screen readers also have their own learning curve, right? Let me just reduce the volume for now. Yeah, so these work a little differently than our usual touch and tap. The moment you turn on a screen reader, the learning curve is pretty high, right? So when you want to do, say, swiping and so on, you need to use 2 fingers. And when you want to choose some option, you'll have to do double click, right? And when you want to go left and right, again, you can do, swipes and so on. So that is how you basically use a screen reader, and a person with, say, low vision or blindness use the screen reader to completely operate their system, right? So this is one such example. There are plenty of others. Maybe let me also just go ahead and show you another one in my phone. This is available only in select devices, but I hope in yours also this is available. Let's just test that feature. This is called Lookout. Any of you have heard about this Lookout. Maybe you can also try in your phones if that app is available. These days it's general available. Lookout. Yeah. Any of you got that Lookout app? Yeah, it's available. Okay, perfect. You can try that. So for now, what I've done is I have just turned it on. So what this app does is it is going to go ahead and yeah, thank you so much. Yeah. This is going to go ahead and read out what it sees on the camera, right? So it has a couple of options. Let's try to test them out. So there is just this explore, right? So let me go ahead and point to anything, right? So let's point it out to say the screen and let's see what it talks out, right?
2 chairs. Computer monitor. Text, Samvad, laptop. Mouse. Desk. Refrigerator. Television.
Yeah, what did it say there? So refrigerator. So that's when as a data science student, you all have a role to play, right? It has to improve quite a lot, but it still does a pretty amazing job, right?
Currency.
I've gone for currency. So let's also check for some Indian currencies, well, if it does a good job or not. Let me take some currencies. So 50 rupees, 100 rupees currencies, Indian currencies, a lot of countries' currencies it will be able to do. And now slowly you also realize that are these assistive technologies only for people with disabilities? Maybe I don't know all the currencies in the world, but tomorrow I might have to travel for some business reasons. I might have to use their currency, and this will help me to know what currency, what denomination it is, right? So these are some of the examples, and you can actually explore a lot more of these features. So talkback we just did with your friend, Lookout. This is what I tried just now. There's also magnification, which can enable your page to say 400% and 300% zoom, and users will be able to go ahead and read their screen for low vision users. Color correction, again, it's a feature where you can go ahead and change a lot of color priorities, right? For example, in color filters, right? You have a lot of these color varieties available, and you'd be able to go ahead and choose your background palette and color contrast and such personalizations. There are also other features available even in Windows and your laptops and Android devices, which is live transcribe and live captions, right? So these could also be helpful as you talk to someone, right? So for example, you are talking to a user who's hard of hearing, right? And if you are in a meeting room, right? So whoever is talking, all those get live transcribed, and the person who is hard of hearing can see the transcription going on. There's also live captions available, which is even more powerful than the live transcribe, where it also transcribes everything that comes out of the speaker of your phone also, right? Maybe you're watching a audio clip or a video clip, which doesn't have a caption or a transcript created by the owner. Even then it will be able to on the go do some captioning for you. And there's also voice access, which you can use to control your laptop, right? Just tell them to do something. Like people also often use these mainstream, for example, ask the weather and so on, right? With Siri and stuff. So these are all the different accessibility features that we have explored about. But assistive technologies don't solve everything, right? So this is a very important aspect. Yeah, I want all of you to focus. So far, what we have done, we have seen what are disabilities, their types, the different schools of thought, and also about the disability etiquettes, what we'll have to follow with people with disabilities. And we also saw about assistive technologies, right? And what are assistive technologies, how they help us, and all these freely available tools which do exist, which can help people with disabilities. But then why are we making this statement that assistive technologies don't solve everything? We told that, okay, functional solutions model is what we align best. We told that, okay, we don't bother about the other schools of thought. But if a person with disability has a problem, we will create assistive technologies, and these assistive technologies will help the people with disabilities. This is what we agreed upon. Then why are we making the statement that assistive technologies don't solve everything? Yeah, any idea? Very good point. They may be costly, or they might not know how to use it. What else could be reasons? Maintenance. Okay. What else? Okay. Experience of something. How do they relate it? Perfect. Right. So that is where we are coming. Right. So let me give an example both in the physical world and the digital world. And then we will get on to why assistive technology alone is not important. Let's take this example. Right. Let's say that John is a wheelchair user. He's using a wheelchair. What is a wheelchair, by the way? Assistive technology, yes, it is already existing. It is also cheaply available, right? It is affordable these days. A wheelchair is already available. John, being having a motor disability, is already using a wheelchair. He wants to go to a bank. He's already, come out of his place. He's using the public transport and so on, and he has reached the bank. And let's say, suppose the bank is in the second floor. If this particular bank doesn't have a lift or a ramp, will John be able to go inside the bank? So what is the problem here? Assistive technology exists, the barrier exists. Even though assistive technologies are existing, the person is not able to go into the bank. Similarly, if you draw parallels to this in the digital world. So what are some digital assistive technologies? Can you name a couple of them? We just saw about them. Yeah, lookout, screen readers, all of these, voiceover, all of these are available. But if you are coding a website which is not following some principles, then the screen reader will not work correctly, right? Inaccessible web page. This is in comparison with a building not having a ramp or a lift. You get where we are heading? Assistive technologies are existing on one hand. People are developing it. People are using technologies and latest technologies, AI, ML and whatnot, and creating assistive tech. Perfect. But on the other hand, the environment also has to support the use of these assistive technologies, right? If it's the physical environment, we might have to have braille labels all around in these rooms. We might also have to have a ramp in the room for a person with wheelchair to come in. There should be tactile paths, right? So these are all things that we have to do in order for these assistive technologies to work, right? So a typical example of this room, right? So this room has only chairs, or you have steps. There's no ramp in it, right? So if the building is not accessible, then having an assistive technology is not going to help. Similarly, in the digital world, although you have assistive technologies, plenty of them freely available, if you create a website or a mobile application or any digital artifact, it could be a PowerPoint, it could be a PDF, it could be anything. There are certain guidelines, there are certain principles. If you don't follow them and if you just create a solution, then these assistive technologies will not work with them, right? That is what this line says, that assistive technologies are extremely valuable, but the people who create the environments must create them with accessibility in mind, right? And that is when these assistive technologies will work. So that is where this whole field of accessibility comes into play, right? So you might also see a lot of blogs and written materials specifying this as A11Y, right? Because in accessibility word, you might see that in between A and Y there are 11 characters. So just like I18N or internationalization, localization, and so on, wherever you see A11Y in books and blogs and internet, it simply means accessibility, right? So is everyone clear with accessibility versus assistive technology? Are they the same? Yeah, definitely not. Assistive technology is a field altogether to develop technologies and solutions to help people with disability. But that is not enough. Unless the environment, which could be either physical environment or digital environment, if we don't follow certain principles, then having these assistive technologies is a use of time. They will not work properly, right? I'll also prove that with you some games and challenges. Yeah. So digital accessibility in general is an inclusive practice of removing barriers that prevent people with disabilities to access, digital content and contribute to it. In simple, we can also tell that accessibility word itself can be divided into two, right? One is access, one is ability. So access to everyone, regardless of our ability, is called accessibility, right? It applies to both physical world and digital world. And every year we celebrate, Global Accessibility Awareness Day, which is the third Thursday of every May month, right? So the May 16th was celebrated globally as Global Accessibility Awareness Day. And you might be now wondering that, okay, what are these guidelines, right? So if it's a physical building, right? So if you have any, civil engineering friends or someone in your family who works in civil engineering, you might also check with them that there are a lot of guidelines that when you build a building, how should the building be made accessible, right? How should that be compliant so that, people with disabilities can use the building. Similarly, for the digital world, we have this, which is called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. It's, in simple called WCAG, and it keeps on, versioning. So currently we are in the latest, which is 2.2. And you all know the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium. Yeah. So they have, come up with these guidelines. We'll also have a brief look at what they are in this, workshop. But in general, these are the guidelines that one has to follow to make our websites, mobile apps, PDF, PPTs, all our digital things accessible. So that if a user who is using assistive technology, these will then start working, right? But what about the current state, right? So do you think all our internet is accessible? If it is not, what percentage is inaccessible? Any idea? What percentage of the internet is accessible or inaccessible? Anyone? Yeah, go ahead. It's fine. Yeah, what was that? Yeah, what percentage is accessible for people with disabilities? Meaning they follow all these guidelines and with assistive technology, they would work. What could be that percentage and what percentage is inaccessible? Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. 20% is inaccessible, you mean? Okay. So let's see the ground reality. 95.9%, right? And that too, this is not the whole World Wide Web, but WebAIM is an organization who do this reporting every year. And how they have done this is they take the top 1 million websites, right? 1 million websites based on the usage hit, right? It could, of course, have all our essential apps, banking apps, e-commerce, entertainment, and all these types of apps, right? So they take the top 1 million websites in the world on the basis of usage. And on that 1 million web pages, home pages, right? They do an accessibility review. We will talk about this accessibility review in a while. They just check if these are compliant with these guidelines and principles. Have they been created with accessibility in mind or not? And the results are 95.9% are not complying to those guidelines. Why is it so? Why do you think these are all top websites, right? They are day in and day out used by people across the world, but these are not accessible. So why is it not accessible? Any idea why that could be? Yeah, awareness. Yeah, very good. So these websites are then created by people, right? Software engineers. If you dig down this problem a little, so there is this Teach Access Association in the US who conducts surveys around accessibility, and only 2% of companies report that it is easy to find people who know accessibility or who have accessibility skills. And just 3% of them report that in their existing company, in their workforce, people have accessibility knowledge. Rest all of the 95-97% of people are working in software engineering, but they don't know about accessibility. And outside, when we look out to recruit some people with disabilities or recruit people who are aware of disabilities and accessibility, we are not able to find people, right? Why is that again happening, right? That all boils down to your friend's answer that in general, in a typical CS curriculum, there is not enough emphasis about accessibility. Of course, your curriculum does have it, right? So you all are learning about it, but it's a very good start. Maybe 10 years back, if you ask me, it was absolutely not there. And even today, in 95+% of CS curricula, right, accessibility is not taught as a part of their curriculum. We talk about NLP, AI, ML, security, and all these, but accessibility, which is very central to access, right? So security and so on comes later, right? So there's a product that is available, there's a security breach, your data getting leaked and so on. But accessibility, on the other hand, there's a group of users who might not even be able to use their application. But such a serious topic is not emphasized enough in CS. But things are slowly trying to change, right? So some of my research work also is in that direction. And in your course handout as well, we have introduced accessibility, right? You're actually going to learn intricacies of this sometime later in your programs, right? So we'll take a very short break here. So what we will try to do is you can take your exploration activities where, so for each of those glasses that we have kept there, there is also a very small description about that type of, low vision. And you can also feel free to wear those glasses and have a quick glimpse of how it looks like. We'll come back in 5 to 10 minutes and we'll again, resume about the whole accessibility angle, right? So far we discussed disabilities and assistive tech, but this is not going to help unless we create accessible websites and mobile apps. Only then these assistive tech will help, right? So we will learn about those principles and so on, and then we will wind up. So you can also solve these puzzles in your free time, right? So all these puzzles that each of you have got are related to accessibility, right? Accessibility and disability and so on. What you can do is you can just, it's a typical crossword. You can play those and, you can also send it to me and you can, win some goodies or some prizes. And for now, you can just explore these and we will again come back. So there are 2 copies, one in that table and one in this. It's the same thing. So half of you can just, use this one and a couple of you can use the other one. Yeah. Cool. Go ahead. I'll be still around. If you have any queries around them, I'll be able to assist you. There's also a box there which has playing cards, but the cards are actually in Braille. Yeah. You can also have a look at that one, right? So this is just for some seconds, right? So this is not the actual experience of people with disabilities. That is way more different than this. But this is just to sensitize you to the different forms of visual impairments and so on. So now let's get back. So far what all we have done. Any volunteers who can summarize me what we have done in this past 1.5 hours? Anyone? Or each one point? Yeah. We'll also get some swags or goodies for all that. So if you answer more from now on, you can get those goodies. Yeah. Where did we start? What all have we done? Go ahead. Types of disabilities. Okay, very good. What else? Statistics. Yeah, we started from there. Yeah. Perfect, which is disability etiquette. We spoke about how we should behave with people with disabilities. Yeah, you said something. Solutions. Okay, perfect. So we started with the whole story of there are, more than 1.52 billion people with disabilities, which is 1 in, 5 of us. And we also spoke about the different categories of disabilities and the actual different disabilities, the recognized ones in the country. And we also had a brief discussion about the various schools of thought, right? What are the different models, like the medical model, functional solutions model, and all of that. And then we also discussed about various assistive technologies and disability etiquette. And finally, we had concluded this talk that assistive technologies is one direction, which is good. If you can, create innovative solutions, you are going to help people with disabilities, which is fine. But if you don't create it in an accessible manner, meaning if the environment, either physical or digital, are not accessible, then having these assistive tech is useless, right? Similar to not a building not having a ramp or a lift is useless for someone who is still on a wheelchair, right? Wheelchair is already invented. It is there. There are so many screen readers and other types of technologies, assistive tech that already exist. But if the websites and mobile apps themselves are not created with accessibility in mind, they will not work correctly, right? One example could be, let's say, suppose there is an image placed in a website, right? So a visually impaired person will not be able to see this image, correct? So while you code it out, have all of you done any coding so far? HTML, JavaScript a little bit? Yeah, any of you who has not done any programming yet? Okay, perfect. Okay. So while we do some coding, for this particular image, we might also want to give an alternate text. We want to tell them that, this is what is present in this image. So when a screen reader comes to that image, it will be able to read out, this is what is present in the image. So if you code something while you are doing some HTML programming, if you just have an image tag, if you put an image, visual users will be able to see the image, but the screen reader will not read anything. If you have not given any alternate text, it will not read, and the people who are using a screen reader will not perceive what is going on, right? So this is one small example. Like these, there are a lot of guidelines which is documented in the WCAG. Now let's get back and have a quick discussion around whom is it going to benefit if you create accessible products, right? Is it just people with disabilities or beyond? Everyone, right? Perfect, everyone. So in general, who all does it help? It of course helps people with disabilities, right? And it is also going to help organizations. and it is also going to help people without disabilities. So first and foremost, how does it help people with disabilities? It opens up their own life, right? It gives them independence, and something that is impossible has now become possible with the use of accessibility plus assistive tech. Both are going hand in hand, right? They are not, enemies. They have to come together. Assistive technologies have to evolve in one direction, and on the other hand, your websites also has to be compatible with them, meaning you have to follow these guidelines. Only then people with disabilities will be able to use these. Accessibility isn't just nice to have, it is necessary, right? It is a mandatory requirement, right? So this is going to let people to do their personal banking, entertainment, e-commerce, everyday activities that we do. People with disabilities will be able to do it online only if your websites, mobile apps are created with accessibility in mind. A lot of beginners who write some code, their first point of view will be to develop something, right? Something that works, something that is working on my page, they're happy with it. But that is only for few users, right? But what about the rest of the world, right? So all of us have diverse abilities. So again, accessible transportation systems, are accessible architectures, and all these are going to help people with disabilities. But how is it going to benefit organizations, right? It is going to benefit organizations first and foremost because of public perception, right? There's already a general statement, right? So Apple is very good with accessibility, right? Because a lot of accessibility features were introduced very early on in Apple products, right? Now, of course, it is available in all the products, but they were one of the pioneers in introducing these accessibility features. So in general, if your company is caring about accessibility, then it gives a good public perception that this company is very mindful about accessibility. They care about inclusion, equality, and any product that they create, it will consider everyone, right? So there's a good perception about it, right? So even the IIT Madras campus, this is a very accessible campus, right? So right from your auditorium and all other places, you might have seen a lot of events happening here because the physical accessibility of this place is pretty impressive, right? So as a brand, it gives you more, good public perception of accessibility. And second thing, it increases compatibility, right? So with today's modern era, we cannot be telling that, my users will use my solution only in this mobile app or only in this desktop and so on, right? They can use it on any particular user agent, right? From say watches and, different types of mobile devices, tablets and so on. So it offers various, types of compatibility options. And another important aspect of accessibility is indirectly it improves SEO, right? Any of you heard about SEO, search engine optimization, right? You've also studied about it. Perfect, right? So when you actually think about accessibility, you are caring about accessibility, it means that you will follow semantic HTML. And when you follow semantic HTML, you will do a lot of extra tags. You will be giving alt text, and you will use proper heading structures, article structures, and so on, which is actually indirectly going to benefit your SEO, which is good. And of course, accessibility increases your customer base, right? Which is a very important topic because accessibility is not charity, right? We are doing it so that our product can reach everyone, right? So people with disabilities are people and they do have money to spend. So let's take a very quick example. Let's say suppose the e-commerce market is say inaccessible. A lot of websites that which are in e-commerce, let's say suppose they are not offering great accessibility. And let's say suppose you enter the market and you are now creating a website which is very, very accessibility friendly, right? It is compatible with all these assistive tech and you are adhering to all these accessibility principles. Then people with disabilities will obviously try to switch to your websites, right? Because the other websites are not allowing them to even access, but yours is even better, right? So in general, it is also going to increase the customer base if you are able to provide a more accessible solution because you are targeting everyone and not just, a group of abled users. Accessibility increases the eligibility for your funding. So what do we mean by that? So in a lot of countries, accessibility is a mandatory for government solutions, right? So if you build a new software for say the UK government or the Europe government or even for the Indian government, so there is a requirement by which they procure software, right? Do you think all softwares of government is created by the government? Not really, right? So it is usually outsourced to, or tendered to other companies, and that is what is, given to the government. So during these, contracts or during procurements, these days accessibility is also one of the criterias, right? If there is accessibility complaints, there is more chances that, your product will be chosen during the bidding and so on, right? Very, very important point, right? So far we have not touched this, but this is very vital for you to know that accessibility is a legal mandate. Yeah, I repeat, it is a legal mandate. If you create a website which is not accessible to people with disabilities, they can directly sue your company in the court. Right? If you create a simple web page, or you're doing a startup tomorrow, or you're working for a company who's doing a product, if you have any digital presence, let's say you have a website, it is running on the internet. A person with disability is using your website, and if they are not able to use it, why they'll not be able to use it? Because you have not created it using these accessibility guidelines. It is not compliant. Maybe their screen reader is not working well. They are maybe not able to do something with keyboard, right? If it is not accessible, they can directly go to the court telling that this company and this software, they are discriminating me because of my ability. An abled person is able to use the software, but because of my disability, I'm not able to use the software, and hence this is social discrimination, right? Across the globe, there are several laws for accessibility, and in particular, digital accessibility also. And there are severe penalties for this, which is millions of dollars every year are going because of these legal suits, right? In particular, in India also, it is a legal mandate, right? Not just in the US and so on. Yeah, go ahead. You had a question? Photography, okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Why is that so? Why is it that your intended audience is not everyone? Right? So that is what is a mindset change that we might want to have, right? Any product, anything that we create is for everyone, right? If we are excluding a group of users, it simply means inherently we have a bias and we are discriminating someone, right? It can be a photography site, it could be a portfolio site, but why do we want to restrict that only to abled people, right? A person with disability could still use it, right? They could still get to know about your good work. You can describe each of your image very well. You can tell that this photograph was taken in the Sahara Desert, or this is what is depicted in this image. So they can still, have a look at the website, right? So there is no exceptions for digital accessibility. It just states that any digital artifact, it can be a website, mobile app, it can be PowerPoint, documents, anything that you create, it needs to be accessible. There is no question of people with disabilities will not use my website, so I will not adhere. We cannot assume that they will not use your website, right? And in fact, a lot of people do want to use it. They are not able to do because we are not creating accessible websites for them. You get what I mean? Right. So there are a lot of Indian accessibility regulations also, right? The first one, which is we have Right to Persons with Disabilities Act, which is a very famous act, which empowers and protects people with disabilities. And it has been amended for several times now. And the last amendment happened last year. And even before, there was accessibility mentioned in Indian law. But in 2023, the last year's amendment, there is very clear specifications about digital accessibility, right? And Sugamya Bharat campaign. So this was a campaign that started in 2015. And this whole campaign is about, across the country, try to educate people about accessibility, both physical accessibility and digital accessibility. And one of the major projects that was undertaken was to make all public places of India, like railway stations, accessible. And to an extent, this has been very successful, right? If you see any metro station in India, definitely it will be accessible. It will have ramps, it will have lifts, it will have braille labels, there will be announcements, there will also be text of what is the next stop, right? All the guidelines of public accessibility or physical accessibility has been taken care. But digital is still lacking behind. So in the latest amendment of RPD Act, it has been very clearly told that any digital artifacts also in India, right? It is not just to the government, right? So there are government websites like, your railway booking and your post office and banks and so on, which is government run. Not just that. Even if you are a public company running out of India, right? You should also still comply to accessibility because your users are still in India, right? So you might start a new, food delivery application or say a medicine app or things like that. Your consumers are still people from India. So they must also still comply to all these accessibility regulations. So the law that protects or talks about accessibility is the RPD Act. The second one is not a law, Sugamya Bharat or accessibility campaign is more of an awareness program, right? Where across the globe or across the country in India, we want to first make people aware about accessibility. And very recently, we have this standard, right? So you might have also heard this IS standards, right? A lot of products and actual physical things, there are IS standards. So similarly, we have one for accessibility as well. And this got amended very recently in 2023, sorry. And from this year, it is into action, which is 17802, which talks exactly about in India, if you're developing a, digital artifact, what are the different types of accessibility you want to care about. And this is by the Bureau of Indian Standards. So in general, the crux is that accessibility benefits everyone, not just people with disabilities, but it also helps the organization. It also helps everyone. And this is a very good comic, right? So if you see what is going on in this comic, there are a group of kids, right? And there is a very snowy place and there is a ramp. There is also a couple of steps. And the steps and the ramp, all of them are filled with snow. And there is a person who is shoveling the snow. He's just cleaning up the snow. And he's doing the steps first, right? He's doing the steps first. And the wheelchair person who is sitting there is asking, why are you not doing the ramp, right? And then the person who is cleaning up the snow says, there are so many kids waiting here. First, I will clean the steps and then I will go to the ramp, right? That is what he says. And then the wheelchair user says, but if you clean the ramp, all of us can get in. Is that true? In this exact, situation, if that person had cleaned the ramp first, the person with a wheelchair can also go in. The other kids can also walk in the same ramp, right? In usual situations, a lot of time people without disabilities also use the ramp with their luggage and so on, right? So it is going to help everyone there. But if they are going to take care only about the steps, the kids without a wheelchair will be able to go in, but the wheelchair user has to wait. So what is the crux of this? What is the meaning of this is that if you take care of accessibility, it is going to help everyone, right? So that is the moral of this whole, topic of why accessibility. Accessibility definitely is a necessity. It is the livelihood for people with disabilities. But it also has added advantages, like it helps everyone. It is also going to benefit organizations not getting into legal trouble. It also gives them a good impression in the public. It also improves their, search engine optimization and so on. So now we'll get on to those last aspects of web accessibility principles. Yeah, go ahead. Perfect. In the next few slides, we will see they will use something called as a refreshable braille device, right? So whatever is shown on the screen, if a person is blind, they will hear it out, right? A screen reader is available. Someone who is hard of hearing, who cannot hear, they can directly read it from the screen. But if a person has both loss of vision and loss of hearing, then there is a specialized device called refreshable braille. Whatever is displayed will come in that device in the braille form, but line by line, right? They will read one line, they will press next. The next line on the screen will get embossed in braille in that device, right? So we will also see about it. Exactly, correct. We will also talk about that. So in general, that's a very, very important question that your friend brought up, that can I be 100% sure that my product is fully accessible? There can be some users who still are not able to access my product, right? So then what is the drawing line? Where does the legal regulation say? So the legal regulation says that since you cannot test your product with every user, you're right. So every user we will not be able to practically test. But legality wise, if you are satisfying all the guidelines given in the WCAG, it means that you are going to hit maximum number of people. There is very, very rare situation that you have adhered to all guidelines, but still people with disabilities are not able to use. If that is the case, legally still you cannot do anything. If you are satisfying the WCAG criteria, then legally you are fine. The company cannot be sued. But definitely as per the input of the user, you can go ahead and do something extra for those users. We'll also touch upon this topic at the last as to how this WCAG guideline itself is evolving. Yeah, this is a very good question. We will again, come back to it. So what is this guideline all about, right? So it is created by the Web Accessibility Initiative by W3C, which is the World Wide Web Consortium. This whole web accessibility guideline, right? We spoke about the whole story. Assistive technologies will work only when you create products with accessibility in mind. What is accessibility in mind? Accessibility in mind means following these guidelines or principles. So these principles are put under 4 buckets. The first bucket is called perceivable. The second one is called operable. The third one is understandable. The fourth one is robust. You can always remember this by the first characters, right? It is called POUR, perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. The complete WCAG guideline fall into one of these 4 buckets, right? So in the next few minutes, what we will do is we will understand what these are. We'll take some examples of them and then we will move on. Finally, I'll also have some feedback and so on, and we can, let me know if you are interested further in digital accessibility, where in further online sessions, we can go deep into these guidelines. How can you write code to satisfy the guideline? How can you check if that is, accessible or not? And we will go deep into it because there are more than 100 such guidelines, right? We will not be able to do justice in like a couple of hours. So let's briefly look at what are these broad principles. Perceivable in simple means information and user components, user interface components, whatever we develop must be presented in ways which people with disabilities, or in general, it should be satisfying at least one of the 4 or all the 4 sensory modalities. And we will come back to this. Operable, again, it should be operable with a variety of inputs. And understandable, your content as well as your interfaces should be more intuitive and easy to understand. And finally, robust, it must be able to work in a lot of agents, right? So now let's look at each one of them, right? So perceivability is about making the output of web content available through multiple sensory modalities. So how many senses do we have as human beings? 5 senses, right? So what are those? You have sight, you have sound, you have touch, you have taste and smell. So far, we have not gone to that state where you can taste or smell the internet, correct? We cannot do that. But the other 3 are still possible, and you have to take care that any of the digital product that you create, these 3 sensory modalities can be used to interact with the web, right? We'll go further, you will understand this better. Perceivability, which is seeing the web content, right? Anyone who is visually abled, right, who doesn't have a visual challenge or a visual impairment, they use the web via seeing it, right? There's a web page, you have a mobile app and so on. We just see the app and we start using them, right? This works well for everyone who have a good vision, but not for all, right? For people who have low vision, who have color blindness, or someone who have, say, a blindness, they will not be able to see the solution, right? It could be mobile app, web app, anything, right? They will not be able to see your solution. So what do they do, right? That is what is this perceivability principle. So in general, why is this also happening is a majority of software developers are young in age, and they usually consider that the user of my product will be as good as me or as abled as me, which is what is a biggest misconception, right? The users of our software could be anyone, right? From a small kid to a very old person with, say, depleting abilities, or a person with disability, anyone. But usually what do? We think whatever I'm going to develop, it is going to be used by people who are like me, right? Which is a big mistake, right? So that is why there is a concept called inclusive design. Inclusive design and universal design are 2 concepts where I am going to develop a software, but I realize that it is not for me. It is for a variety of users, right? So if you go to a restaurant, does the chef cook for himself according to his taste or for your taste? Your taste, right? But why is it for software engineering that if I am a software engineer, I am developing as per my needs? That is what usually is happening, right? This 95% of internet is inaccessible because engineers think the software that I am developing is for people like me, right? So we are not practicing inclusive design, right? Hearing the web content, right? This is what is the next thing. People who have good vision, they will be able to see the web. People who are not having good vision, maybe blind or maybe with low vision or color blindness, they might hear the web using what we already discussed about it today. Anyone? How will they be able to hear it? Screen reader, very good, perfect. They'll be able to use a screen reader to go ahead and listen it. And it is fundamentally a little different, correct? For example, if you go to a park, right, going and seeing the park and hearing about how that park from someone else is fundamentally different. But that different doesn't mean it is bad, right? Because people who are blind are always used to it. That is their common modality of knowing about things. They don't see it, so they just hear about it, right? So this different doesn't mean it is bad. But we need to ensure that our website is coded in such a way that the screen reader will work correctly. I'll give you a very small example, right? So all of you have heard about the heading tags, H1, H2, H3, up to H6. There is heading tags. Why do we use them? Hierarchy. Identifying the text, like H1 is very important, and then underneath you have H2, H3, and you need some hierarchy of it. Without hierarchy, if I just create a text using a paragraph tag, and if I just bold it, if I make the size bigger and so on, will it look like the same hierarchy holds true? I'm using CSS, I'm making it big and so on. So visually it might look like it is all underneath and everything is fine. But when a screen reader comes in, it will be able to read only text. It will not convey this is heading 1, this is heading 3 and so on. It will not be able to convey that, right? So that's a problem. For a visual user, you are telling that this is the utmost important, then this is within that. But for a screen reader user, you're not conveying, right? So these are all some small, principles that engineers violate, because of which the screen reader will misbehave. Let's take another very simple example. In HTML, the very first line, right? In HTML, you write a specification of language. Do you remember that? HTML lang is equal to en, like English, right? What if I am creating my web page in some other language, right? I should include that language in my lang tag. If I just leave it as English, but write something in Hindi or some other language, right? When the screen reader comes there, it will struggle, right? Because you have told English, but here it is some other characters. It will start, just blabbering something. But for a visual user, it can still work, because intuitively by knowing it, the visual user will know that, okay, this is all in English, and now maybe you have written 2 lines or some quotation in say Hindi. They'll be able to perceive it. They know it. But for a screen reader, it will suddenly get confused there and it will stop, reading. So you should have made those 2 lines alone the language attribute to be Hindi. Now you understand why the whole lang attribute is used, right? For these type of assistive technologies to work better. Feeling the web, to coming to your point, right? So the first one was seeing the web. For someone without a visual impairment, they can have a look at that. For someone who is having difficulty in visual, they can use a screen reader. But someone who is deaf and blind, they can use the touch, which is feeling the web, right? So this is called a refreshable braille device, right? So you see those white dots there, those are the braille, right? So you also saw these cards, right, which I showed you, which is having braille in them, but those are print braille. But this is a device, which is a USB device. You can connect it to your PC, and every line will get into this device as a text, only line by line. First, the perceivable feeling web content, the title will go into this device. The person will touch the hands and read that whole line, and then the next line will go on and so on. So the person is blind and also deaf, but can still touch this and definitely perceive the web. But this is not a trivial job. Firstly, teaching about braille to a person who is deaf and blind is very, very challenging, right? There's very small fraction of people who are able to do this, but the technology does exist, right? This is also one of the reasons that not a lot of people are born with these two disabilities. They acquire these disabilities over a period of time, right? So those people might have already learned language skills and so on, but later might have become blind maybe due to an accident or something, right? So they still know English, and they would have maybe learned English, and then they quickly learn about Braille and they start using these type of devices. So yeah, go ahead. No, that is where I'm telling that when you code it out, these type of small regulations, if you don't adhere, then it will not go to this device correctly, right? When you write HTML code, if you don't specify the language, right? If you have written English, then correctly it'll, the English code will be translated to Braille and the synthesizer will go to this device. But while coding out, if you don't specify certain things, for example, there is a list, right? List item, do you all know? Putting a list, bullet points or list. It should be coded as a list. But without a list also, can I create a list which looks like a list? Definitely we can do, right? That is what is CSS for, right? I can create some bullets, I can put some stars, and I can make it look like a list. But actually, programmatically, it is not a list. That is a violation. Because what will happen is, for a visual user, I will look at those, and because of CSS, I will know that that is a list. But when it goes to a screen reader or when it goes to this type of Braille display, it will not tell that this is a list. It will read it as a single line, which is a problem, right? Because you wanted to convey as a list, but here it is going as a single line. They will not know that it is a list. So it is in the hands of a developer. You have to use correct controls. You should not, reinvent the wheel by doing your own CSS and the flashy content that we discussed. If you put some new results, flash sale and all that, then unknowingly maybe some users who have say seizures or photosensitive epilepsy, they might get triggered because of that, right? So developer has a very important role in these. Why perceivability matters, right? In simple, what we just discussed, if one can't see visual information, then it is useless for them. So they must be able to go ahead and listen to it. They'll be able to listen to it only if you have given alternate text, right? So if you have an image, you should put an alternate text. What is that image about? If you have embedded an audio clip or if you have put a video inside it, you should explain that about what is happening in that video as a caption or a transcript. So a visual user can watch the video, but someone who is blind can go ahead and read the alternate description, meaning the screen reader will read it out for them, or the Braille device will, display that. If one can only hear, right? If can only hear, then screen reader will help. If they can't hear, but if they are visually abled, then they can just see the screen, right? Someone who is only deaf, they can use the screen. For both, we just discussed about that. So this is what it is. This is exactly your question. If you read this first para, it is good news that we don't have to cure blindness or deafness or any of these. It is only that while we create these solutions, images and sounds need to be made more accessible to sensory disabilities, right? To make an image accessible, provide a digital text description so that the screen readers can read. And to make an audio recording accessible, give its corresponding transcript or captions and so on, right? So podcast, right? Someone who is not able to, hear a podcast, someone who is deaf, they can go ahead and read its version, right? What are the two people talking, right? The transcript, they can go ahead and read it. So again, these are all very, simple examples that I'm giving you, but web accessibility or in general, digital accessibility has 100 plus success criteria. These are just one example that I'm giving you, that if it is an image, give an alternate text. If it is a recording, give a transcript and so on. The next guideline was operable, right? Operable simply means that do all of us use only the mouse? Yeah, what are the different input mechanisms to a PC? Mouse, then keyboard. Yeah, what else? Touchpad. What else? Joystick. What else? Right? So for all of these, my website should work. It should work with the mouse or touchpad, with the keyboard, with touch screen, voice recognition, and with other specialized devices like, your headband, sticks, all of that it should work. But you guys know JavaScript. JavaScript is really notorious. It's capable of a lot of things. If you override some behavior, if you tell that when you click on it, this should happen. But what if someone is not clicking and they are using a keyboard, right? They do a keyboard enter, or when they use some other key, that will not work, right? So that is all about this guideline. That is, not everyone uses a computer like you do, right? You might be working fine with, say, touchpad or mouses, but someone who has, say, severe arthritis, they might not be able to click the mouse. They just use a keyboard. And if you have not created using this keyboard accessibility in mind, it will be a very difficult task. So I'll give you a quick challenge. So any of you who is willing, you can join me. So there's this small website, right? It is a wedding spot booking. There's a lot of halls available, and you have to book for a guest capacity of 100 to 150 people. You are expecting 100 to 150 people for a marriage. You want to book a marriage hall, and you want to book it in the budget of around $45,000, right? 45,000. And you can also add other services. This is the website given. But the thing is, you should not use any mouse. You should not use any touch or trackpad. You should do this activity only using a keyboard. Yeah, who's ready? Yeah, the whole operable functionality told us that you should be able to do a job regardless of the input. I should be able to do it in mouse or keyboard or joystick or any input device. In this case, I am telling you only using keyboard. Go ahead and book this for me. Put these filters and go ahead and book the wedding hall. Anyone who wants to try? Yeah, come. And the time given is 120 seconds. Yeah, 2 minutes. So what is actually happening? What are you actually doing? Yeah, what keys are you using?
Tab.
So your friend is using tabs and reverse tab, right? So in order to go or traverse the web using keyboard, you have to use a tab, and for reverse you need to use a shift tab. You see the number of items in the menu? For a mouse user, the moment the menu opens, I can just go to the country that I want. I can just drag my mouse where I want. But for a keyboard person, if that is in the last column, they might keep tabbing till they reach there, right? Yeah, you'll have to book a hall for 100 to 150 people, and it should be having a budget of $45,000. And you can also add drinks and other services as extra. Yeah, any location is okay. Yeah, 100 to 150. How can I access the map? For a mouse user, I can go drag and see the map and so on. A keyboard user, how can I use the map? Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Yeah. So thank you so much. So this website is not very clearly coded. Because of that, you will not be able to achieve this task, the one that I told, in keyboard. But with mouse, you could have, just see here. If you are going to the main website, and if you just, go to some of these venues, I just click on something. So I'm using the mouse now, right? So I'm not using the keyboard. So in this case, that is still possible, right? If I go here on the left side, I see a lot of filters. There is a budget here. I can just drag this to 45,000, right? And there is this guest, right? Guest, how many guests we wanted? 100 to 150. So all this is working fine with the mouse. But with the keyboard, he was struggling, right? Why? Because the website has not been created in such a fashion which is friendly for a keyboard only user. You get the point? What is operable? With any input, I should be able to, right? Let's take another example, which is just a couple of code snippet. In this bad example, so where is my current focus? In the first button. If I do a tab, where should I go? Second button. Then when I do a tab, where should I go? Third button. I did third button. Where did I go? I went to the next row, right? So why didn't I go to this third button, right? So these are all certain principles. This is called focus order, right? If there are some controls, they should receive focus in order. You should not just skip, right? Maybe if there's a form, you're in the second field. You tab, you expect to go to the third field, but maybe suddenly you have gone to the submit button. Right? So these are all violations, right? Yeah, thank you so much. So everything has to work at the end of the day in simple, no matter what input device you use, irrespective of mouse, keyboard, or mouth stick or headband or whatever it is, these should go ahead and work. People should be able to go into a control, use it, come out. For example, menu items, right? Maybe I should be able to go into a menu item, see what are all there. If I like, I can choose it. If I don't like it, I come out of the menu item. All that I should be able to use only using keyboard also, irrespective of mouses. Right? So this is what I just explained, that in simple, static content was way more accessible. But in today's generation, we have a lot of dynamic content, right? We have a lot of JavaScript being used. You override certain behaviors and so on. But that comes with its own cost. When you use JavaScript, you should be very mindful that with all inputs, this is working, not just with a mouse, right? Control the focus, the example that I showed, right? Suddenly the focus went to some other button, right? Instead of going to the third button, you went to the second row and so on. Right? So these are all bad examples, right? And these focus also should be following a logical order, right? If I open a modal dialog, all of you know, there's a dialog that comes up, right? So once I am done with the dialog, when I close it, it should go back to the same place where it was the focus. Timing again, right? A lot of sites you might have seen that, it puts you under pressure, right? It tells you that, within the next 2 minutes, you'll have to complete this, right? There'll be a long forms and, your application forms and so on is in general very lengthy, right? So you should not put these type of constraints. And if at all you put, they should be sufficient warning to the user that, this page is going to go out of, this session is going to time out. Do you want to extend it further or do you want to stay in this page? What do you want to do, right? Understandable, we looked at perceivable and operable. The third one is understandable. Understandable simply means that understandability is about making content and our interfaces that are very easy to understand and comprehend, right? Firstly, for content, we discussed about this, right? For HTML language, for any of the content, try to make it, understandable and comprehensible, and try to also keep it simple, right? A lot of times, the jargons that you use, right, it may not be familiar for people. In general, the simple thumb rule is anything on your website, use something which an 8th standard student will be able to comprehend. But if you have any technical terms, if you are using a banking site or a very complex website, then have a glossary. Tell that this is the meaning of this word in your own website. Don't let the user go and find it in a dictionary and so on. Try to have it in your own website in a glossary section, right? Long sentences, jargons, unclear words, or even using certain words which is culturally used in one context, right? Maybe in this region that is very popular, but in some other part of the globe, it might be something completely different, right? So try to avoid certain, such type of things, which is for the content. And for your interfaces, as much as possible, we should be consistent and predictable, right? Meaning if you have the top menu items, right? In all the type of pages, the menu should be consistent. Don't jumble them or, maintain consistency, the look and feel, the color palettes. Try to keep them as same throughout the website. And it's always a bad practice to reinvent the wheel, meaning creating your own controls. Always try to use semantic HTML. Only when in need, try to create your own control. Even then, try to, make it accessible and give clear instructions, right? Understandability again has 2 principles, right? Let's cover that quick. The first thing is, firstly, prevent errors from happening. Do we all face errors? Have we made mistakes in websites, right? Firstly, try to prevent it, right? So try to give special instructions that this is what is expected. If it is a password field, these are the expectations for me. These many characters, these many, alphanumeric. And if it is a read-only button, indicate it in such a way, right? If data is in a particular format, like date of birth and so on, indicate it so that you can prevent the error, right? But even if the error happens, try to suggest them on how to correct it. Just don't throw a line telling that there is an error in this field. But what is the error, right? So guide them and this is the format expected, but this is wrong. So try to correct it and so on. So always provide this feedback, right? So if you have submitted a form, tell them that you have successfully submitted a form and so on. Because for users with cognitive disabilities, they may be wondering what happened. There was a form I submitted, but I don't know what's going on, right? There's just a spinner going. So what do I know, right? So always provide feedback for every action that the user takes, right? So finally, the last principle of POUR, right? Perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. So this robust is a more technical guideline which talks about compatibility, right? The websites and the apps and any solution that I build, it should be compatible with a lot of user agents, right? Meaning there are tons of browsers. There are so many types of devices, right? iPads, mobile devices, touchscreen monitors. I can even put it in a television, right? So irrespective of the user agent, my solution should work. How do you code it for it? So have you heard about responsive web design? Yeah. If you create a website, it should also open properly in mobile phone without any content getting lost, right? So that is an example of robustness, right? How you can check for this is you can always use certain validators, right? There are HTML and CSS and JavaScript validators and linters, which you can always go ahead and use. There is also ARIA specifications, right? So what is this about? So these days the internet is completely dynamic, right? Have you also seen about this expand collapse accordions in many websites? Content will be hidden. When you click on it, it will get expanded, right? Such content. For a visual user, you are able to see that it is hidden. When I click something, it is now opening. But what about a screen reader user? Even that should be communicated. You should tell that when you land in that control, you are now in closed state. When you click enter, you have now opened that section, right? So there are some advanced techniques using ARIA, which is accessible rich internet applications. These are again tags. These are HTML tags only, just like your IMG, LI and other tags. There is something called as these parameters, area label, area live and all that, which you can use to communicate that state. Is that section expanded or is that section closed? Where am I? And all these. So finally, coming on to the success criteria, right? So this is the general principles, the POUR principles, but we are not going in depth in the guideline. As I told, there are 100 plus such guidelines which fall into these buckets. So how are these guidelines defined, or what are the different classifications of it, right? So each of these criteria belongs to 3 categories. One is level A. This is more like certificate, you can imagine, right? One is level A, one is double A, one is triple A. Level A means it is must have. It is having only 20 plus guidelines. You have to follow these 20 guidelines. If you don't follow these 20 guidelines, it means your website is miserable. Definitely it is going to impact some users, and definitely you are liable for legal action. This level A guidelines should be definitely satisfied. On top of that, you have level AA. It is should have, like, first you satisfy all the level A, then you go to AA. All those guidelines you satisfy, and then finally you have AAA, which is more good to have. For example, you have a video. Who all are impacted in a video? Who cannot see the video, or who will not be able to perceive a video? Visually impaired. So what is the alternate for them? What should you do for them? Right? You should be able to give them, transcripts and so on, which can be read out by the screen reader. This is level A. Definitely this should be done, right? Let's also assume another case. Who cannot hear, right? Who is hard of hearing, right? For them, what is the support you can do? For the same video, captions you can give, right? They can read the captions perfect, very well and good. That is level A. Now, if you go a little over and above, for the same video, if you create a sign language video, and if you put it, then that is going one step above, right? In some news channels, you might have seen this. In some Indian news channels, right? The news will be happening, and in a small sidebar, you'll also see the same news read out in sign language, right? So that is one step ahead, right? Not just captions. Captions will do the job, but you are also taking some extra effort and you are going to sign language. So that qualifies to be more of a level AA or AAA, right? So all the guidelines are already, defined as level A, AA or AAA. So I'll show you the actual document of WCAG. Are you able to see this? Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.2. So if you go to the left side, all of these are guidelines, right? Every link here is a guideline, right? So for every link, there is actually this level A or AA mentioned here. Are you able to see here? Level A, this is level AA, right? So every success criteria has these 3 grades given. Is it mandatory, or is it should have, or is it good to have? Right? So if you are not compliant to level A, that is when legal trouble comes. Level A is mandatory. You have to take care. Level AA and AAA is going even further and making it more accessible. Finally, how do you test for accessibility? Right? How do I know if there is a website, if there is a mobile app given to me? How can I know if this website or mobile app satisfies this or not? How do I know if this is satisfying these criterias or not? How can we know in general? Yeah, any ideas? It's already there. Yeah, testing, right? Either you can do automated testing, or you can do manual testing, or you can do a testing with a real user with disability, right? You can make them use. So first one is using automated testing. There are a lot of tools available, but none of these tools can do 100%, right? Automation, because a lot of these guidelines are very subjective. A person has to go ahead and decide whether that is a success or a pass. So automated testing is limited. They don't give much accuracy, but they are still a good starter. Yeah. Do we want to do some automated testing on some websites? Can we do it on your IITM Paradox website? It's pretty straightforward. There are a lot of advanced tools, but for this workshop, let's keep it pretty straightforward. Let's do it with a very simple technique. Yeah, this is your website. Is that correct? Yeah. Done. This is your website. This has been loaded. I want to know if this website violates any WCAG guidelines or not. Right? There are many tools you can use, automated testing tools, but I'll cover the very simplest one. Right? The simplest one is called Lighthouse. It is built into the Chrome browser. Very simple. Just go ahead, right click and go to inspect. Inside inspect, there are a lot of things, which is elements, console. You have seen all this. Yeah. There is something called as Lighthouse here, right? I click on Lighthouse. There are many options here. I click on desktop because I am on a desktop. And then there are several categories like performance, accessibility, best practice, SEO and all that. I click on accessibility because I want to do accessibility testing. I don't want to do performance or other type. I click on accessibility and I give analyze. It will now analyze and it will give us a report of how good accessibility or not this website is. Yeah, what is the score? 75%, right? Some features of accessibility or some guidelines are violated. What are those? Come down. Buttons do not have an accessible name, right? So you see this, there is an announcement button here, right? This is an announcement button, right? This one. But it is not given a name that it is an announcement button. So when a screen reader user comes to that button, it will not tell that this is an announcement button. But as visual users, do we all get to know that it is announcement? Because when you see that it is a alert icon, or it is more like announcement icon, you know that it is for alert. But for a screen reader user, it will not tell that it is for announcement. Right? That's a violation. The next one, links do not have a name, right? So if you point at this, what is the link that is given here? You want me to zoom this? Right? If you just hover on it, you will be able to see that this has been linked to IIT Madras link, right? If you click this, it directly takes you to this page. But if you see here, it is not given a name, right? You should be telling that clicking on this link will take you to IITM link, right? That is not there. Similarly, what other issues are there? Background, foreground colors, something is violating and so on. Let's try to do some other website. Yeah. Which one do you want to see? IRCTC website. Very simple. How do I do that? The very first step is go into your inspect, go to Lighthouse, go to accessibility, just analyze the page. So tomorrow when you create projects and so on, how can you do this? You can just go to Lighthouse, run the report. What are all the defects that it comes? Try to go back and fix it and rerun it. And once you rerun, the same issue should not come. You see the accessibility score? Yeah, 59%. There's a lot more improvements that we can do. So as a small task, you can also take this as an exercise, run it on common websites that you use and see what are all the problems, right? So there it looks like there are a lot of problems, here and there, images and so on. So this is how you use a very simple automated testing tool. Of course, you can also use manual testing, where you manually, someone who learns all these accessibility guidelines, right? So they go ahead and review each guideline on a website and decide if this is correct, if this is passing, failing, or is it not applicable. Maybe if a website doesn't even have a video, then those guidelines related to video are not applicable, right? So either it's a pass or a fail or not applicable. So someone has to do this manually on top of the automated testing. And then finally, you have user testing, where you can actually bring in users with different types of disabilities, make them use your software, and then get the feedback from them. How did they use it? How enjoyable was it or not? And then try to improve it. So there's also this whole principle that is going on in the industry, which is called shift left paradigm, or which is also called born accessibility. The ideology is very simple, right? Across all these years, people have been developing websites, and at the end of the website, they will run these automation tests and so on. They will know that it is not accessible. They'll go ahead and fix it, right? In all of your software projects, how do? You go ahead and create a project and then run some testing, you check it, and if something is failing, you go back and fix. So in born accessibility, we suggest that right from the beginning, think about accessibility. While you are coding, think about accessibility. When you write an image tag, okay, you have to give an alternate text. When you are coding a list, it has to be, as a list. It should be programmatically a list. Like these, all the guidelines should be in your mind, so that when you write code, think about it. When a designer just designs a screen, you've heard about Figma and such tools, Adobe, Figma, where you just design a screen. There also you can take care about accessibility, right? The colors that you choose, the color contrast should be passing, right? So we tell that right from design to deployment, try to think about accessibility, and not just at the end of the day, right? When you are just about to complete a project, don't just do some accessibility testing, but right from the beginning, care about accessibility. So what are the accessibility myths? Accessibility benefits only a small minority. Is this true? Yeah, this is a myth, right? So how much is it impacting? It's impacting 20% of the population. It also impacts everyone, right? Their surrounding and maybe a situational disability. Accessibility is a short-term project again, because as and when features keep on evolving, those new features can have accessibility issues, right? So it's an ongoing commitment. It is not just a one-time activity. Similarly, accessibility is ugly. Few people feel that if I create accessibility, then borders will be thick and there will be extra text given and so on. So accessibility will not look good. But that is definitely not the case. Accessible websites can be stunningly beautiful, right? And a lot of things for accessibility are actually invisible. You are given some area labels. So just some hidden things, right? You're not directly impacting something to the UI. People also feel accessibility is hard and expensive. People feel like that, but that is a myth, right? If you train people and if trained engineers are there, accessibility is not expensive, but the consequences of inaccessibility is expensive. If someone directly goes to the court that this website is not accessible, that gives you bad name, that gives you, more fines in the court and whatnot, right? So that is more expensive, but caring about accessibility is not, so costly. So there are a lot of resources, right? I'll also be sharing these materials later. So there are some trainings on accessibility. There is this actual guideline that we looked at. And there is also an association of accessibility professionals, right? So it's a very small group. Globally, we are not even 10,000 people, right? It's a group of people who are accessibility experts and who practice accessibility, who also contribute to the WCAG guidelines. And there's also some careers. So careers wise, there are two things. One track that you can take is you can create assistive technologies yourself, right? That is one track where you create new solutions and tools to help. Or you can take this track of accessibility where you review these, you can become an accessibility tester, you can become an accessibility auditor who reviews companies and who goes ahead and tells that this website is not following these guidelines, go ahead and fix it, and such things. And major MNCs actually have these roles, right? So you might see such roles in Google, Meta, Salesforce. So I am one such person. So my role in Salesforce is to ensure that our products that go hit the market are accessible. So I work with designers, software engineers, testers, managers, all of them to ensure that we are compliant with this WCAG guidelines, right? So these guidelines, all the guidelines we need to be testing. And coming to your question, he had asked that what if I, use my, guidelines, but it is still not accessible, right? So these WCAG guidelines are a good starting point. But just because you satisfy all these criteria, you cannot tell that every person on the planet can use my website or my digital product. So one such direction which WCAG is going to take in next few years is that it will make sure that representative samples of all types of disabilities are testing your product, right? Not just these checklists or these success criteria like a pass or a fail. Let's make actual users test our product and let them certify if they are able to use this or not, right? So that is the direction it is going to. But this is a good start. We have to follow the WCG guideline, and then over and above, you can use actual users to test your product, right? So just to recap what all we did, we started the whole discussion with disability statistics. It is a major, contribution, 20% and so on. And then about, the various types of disabilities, the umbrella, the disability etiquette and so on. And then we touched upon what is assistive technology. Any technology that helps us in our day-to-day life to make our life better is an assistive tech. And then we looked at a lot of examples, some features of Android, Windows and so on. But then there was another question. If all these assistive tech are there, then why should we still care about accessibility? We understood that even though assistive technology exists, if your websites, your solutions, your building, etc. are not created with certain principles, these assistive technologies will not work, right? So that is the whole field of accessibility. And there we have this WCAG guideline, which is, circled around the 4 principles, right? Perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And then we also concluded about certain myths around, accessibility. Yeah. So that's my time. So thank you so much. And there's this form that I would love for all of you to fill. And in further, if you are interested, there's also a question about, future sessions. So as I told, this is a very gentle introduction to this whole field of disability, inclusion, and accessibility. But we can always go deep as engineers as to know what each guideline means, how to interpret it, how to test for it, how to develop code which can satisfy that, right? So this is a very, broad area, but we have just done an introduction today. So we can have subsequent sessions for folks who are interested on, in depth about accessibility. So yeah, you can complete this feedback. Yeah. Have all of you scanned this? Let me know once you've done so that I can move my slides. Or maybe you can use the screen behind. Your friend was not able to. So you can use my connects and yeah, these puzzles, you can solve it in your free time and you can just take it home. So I'll also be sharing the answers and the deck with your coordinators. They can circulate it to you. So you'll also get the answers of those puzzles, right? So that is just like a take home. Yeah, you can distribute this also. So this is more like a puzzle, and if you are able to crack it, you can also, so you can note down my connects. If someone is able to solve it today itself and send me, I'll also give you some, goodies. So these are all created by me only, those toolkits and puzzles and so on. So you can go ahead and, try to solve them. And these are my connects if you want to connect beyond our workshop. So I'm usually not active on any social media apart from Twitter. You can follow me there or my website or, write an email to me anytime. Cool. Thank you so much for your time and attention. And if you have any questions, we can take it up now. Yeah, we have another few minutes. Yeah, so physical accessibility is a completely different game, right? So definitely just like our WCAG criteria, there are a lot of rules and regulations for physical accessibility, but that is usually taken care by policymakers and civil engineers. So there are, construction guidelines. How should a building be? How should a washroom be made accessible, right? Someone with a wheelchair user and, so on. So in airports, you might have also seen that drinking water facility or wash basins will be slightly lower, right? So it will not be at a usual height, it will be lower. So these are all coming under the physical accessibility guidelines. So if you're interested in that field, why not? Right? There are a lot of content around how to make physical accessibility, right? Tactile paths, braille, labels, and all of those. Yeah. So similar to the digital space, you have similar guidelines and so on, which is more interesting for architects and civil engineers. Yeah, it is being focused. Yeah, it is equally being focused, right? But yeah, there are a lot of good steps taken by the government of India. So if you see, you might have heard about NAC and so on, right? Who do accreditation for universities and colleges. So there is a clause that your college campus should be accessible, right? So that one regulation is good enough to make all colleges, all universities in India accessible. But it will not happen in a day's time, right? Because there's a physical change. You need to build an actual ramp and so on. So it will take time. But Your thoughts are correct. So that is the first step, and that is already happening in a lot of major cities. The railway stations, post offices, public places, education, universities, colleges, schools, these are being made accessible. And even for private buildings like malls and so on, it has been given as a guideline to follow it. So it'll take some time, but that is also equally going on in one direction. But equally with the whole digital transformation and digital India movement and so on, it's equally important that our digital space also is equally accessible. Cool. If nothing else, then thank you so much, and have the rest of your workshop a good one. And I'll see you again in some of the deeper discussions if you are interested in this field. Yeah. Thank you so much.